right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to our weekly workshop. My name is Tyson Bailey. I'm the founder here at Trained Advisor, where we help life insurance and annuity-focused producers, retirement planners, land more clients without spending any money on paid ads. Now, just a quick little recap. A lot of the content that I use for these workshops, these weekly workshops, stem from what I've seen over the past week, couple weeks, month, whatever it might be, with the producers and the advisors that we're working with. Now, one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, hey Tyson, what's the best script? What's the best question? What's the best, what's the perfect thing that I can say to a prospect to get them to want to move forward? Now, I get that question on the marketing side, on the sales side. There's a number of different places where I get that question. But instead of going into, hey, here's the perfect script, here's the perfect, question that you can ask or whatever it might be, what I want you to start thinking about is reframing that to creating frameworks for you and your business. Now, when it comes to frameworks specifically, the reason that I like that as opposed to a script is that with frameworks, each and every prospect that you come across is going to be unique to some degree. Now, there's a lot of commonalities between different types of prospects, whether it's a business owner or a doctor or a high income earning C-suite executive. There are a lot of commonalities between those individuals. But when it comes to you as a producer, typically you're going to have more than one tool in your toolbox. Now, with life insurance specifically, and now I know some of you love life insurance, some of you hate life insurance, you prefer annuities over life insurance or investments over life insurance, whatever. I'm using life insurance as the example. With life insurance, I like to refer to it as the financial Swiss Army knife because there are so many different things that you can do with it. So think about a business owner, for example. If you're looking at life insurance as the product, what sort of solutions can you implement with a business owner? Well, you've got retirement planning, you got legacy planning, you got tax planning, you got business transition planning, you got employee retention planning. The list goes on and on. You've got the normal death benefit for life insurance. There are so many things that you can do with life insurance to where if you are trying to just pull out one script with a business owner who you're speaking with for the first time, that script may not apply to that business owner. And so instead of going in and trying to find a script, I want you to start thinking about that in the form of a framework, okay? Now, I'm going to walk you through some frameworks. I'm going to talk about how those apply to the LinkedIn marketing that we do, the ongoing nurturing systems and everything surrounding that. But additionally, if you don't have frameworks, you don't have a way to track your data. Now, one of the things that I've seen, especially from younger advisors, is a lot of times they're going to shoot from the hip with what they want to say in a certain call or with a LinkedIn message or with an email. But when you're shooting from the hip, if that's custom each and every time, you're not going to be able to track data to understand what exactly needs to be optimized. So I had a conversation with a producer, what was this, about 2 weeks ago. And he was like, hey, so I'm getting a lot of leads that are generated, but I'm not getting anybody to move past my first discovery call or first strategy session that I have with that person. They're saying they want a second meeting, but they either don't commit or they don't show up. And so when we're diving into how the framework of the process of that meeting being held, he's like, yeah, I just kind of go with the flow, kind of see what they say, play off of it, and then kind of free ball it from there, right? Now, the problem with that is that if you don't have a framework surrounding that, I have no idea as a producer what you're saying that could be wrong, what you're saying that could be optimized, or how you can word something to make it better. That's what a framework does. Now, with the I'll use LinkedIn messaging as an example, right? So on the LinkedIn messaging, one of the things that we are constantly doing is we're constantly tracking our data to figure out with certain LinkedIn messages, with the wording and the things that we use inside of there, what are people reacting to? What are they interacting with? What gets them to open up that message? On the email side, what are they opening up? What are they clicking on? Because of that data, now we're able to adjust certain wording inside of there to see, okay, hey, this is performing better. Let's run with this. And then we'll try to optimize from there, right? One of the things that I remember specifically was on the LinkedIn connection request side, for the longest time, we were saying, hi, first name, looking forward to connecting with you with an exclamation mark, and then the advisor's name or Tyson at the bottom, right? And so based on that, we were getting a good connection request acceptance rate. But then what we did is we went in and changed the wording. So it says, hey, first name, can we connect with a question mark? And then the advisor's name down below. And all of a sudden we had a 10% jump in conversion rates of people actually accepting that connection request. Now, on top of that, now people are reaching back and responding to that connection request message. So just simple examples of what that trackable data can do for you and your business. Now, when we dive into the different types of framework or the stages of frameworks, this is a quick little list that I came up with of where I see frameworks really coming into play. Now, with this specifically, in each of these stages, you're going to have subsets of frameworks, okay? So when I say a marketing framework, there are subsets to that marketing framework. And I want to give you some examples here in just a minute, okay? Now, the follow-up, that's going to have several sub-stages as well, where you're going to need to have frameworks. But the broad categories are marketing, follow-up, sales, onboarding, and retention. Now, for this call, I'm going to cover the first three, just so we don't have information overload. So again, I'll walk you through exactly where those fit in our process and why they're important. But I don't want you to think that, hey, just because we're talking about marketing, follow-up, and sales, that onboarding and retention are not important. This is something that came up with one of our most successful advisors. We had a conversation last week where doing a great job with marketing, great job with follow-up, great job with sales. But what is happening now and what we're seeing, because we're tracking that data, is that after somebody becomes a client, there's some sort of hole in the process. There's some sort of gap where the retention is not as strong as we want it to be. Now, these clients that we're looking at aren't going anywhere, but a great example is somebody came on board looking for retirement planning help, right? Went through, we're able to implement life insurance, annuities, and this is a multi-six-figure producer, okay? So not somebody who's starting from scratch, really knows their stuff. But what happened is with one client that I remember specifically, the client came on board, and about 3 months after, the client reached out to the advisor and was like, hey, can I get my statements for, the solutions or the products that we implemented? I'm bringing in another advisor who's going to help me do I think it was like tax planning, the sale of a real estate or an investment property, something like that, right? Now, from the advisor side, it was like, hey, whoa. Like, first off, why are you bringing in another advisor, right? Why are you bringing in another professional? Because this advisor also can do the things that they were listing out of the reasons why they're bringing this other person in. Now, what we realized in that process is that number one, the relationship with these clients is phenomenal, right? So they text on a personal basis. They were able to make, I think the advisor made probably close to six figures off of these clients as a husband and wife. But they've got a great relationship. The client is bringing in referrals, but there was a gap in terms of this client's understanding of what the advisor can do for them, everything that they can do. So now we're looking at the onboarding process and the retention process. What are the frameworks that we can implement in order to help new clients understand what else the advisor can do for them? Okay. Now, diving into the LinkedIn marketing frameworks. So when we're looking at LinkedIn marketing as a whole, one of the things that we get asked all the time is, hey, can you build out a custom system for this or that or the other, right? Now, we've got one of the largest IMOs in the country right now is, wanting us to put together a custom marketing system for them specifically, okay? Now, with this, they've got a lot of great content. They've got thousands, if not tens of thousands of producers underneath them. And now essentially they want to take the structure or the framework of what we do on a normal basis and simply plug in their content. So they came to us and said, hey, we've got a lot of great stuff. And there's a couple of organizations that are doing this exact same thing with us, right? But essentially it boiled down to, hey, we've got a lot of great stuff, but we have no way for our producers to go out and get that stuff in front of prospects and generate leads and clients and whatnot, okay? And so when we're looking at this, if we did not have frameworks in place, then it would be extremely difficult for us to be able to go in and implement those types of solutions, okay? So when you're looking at the screen right here, here's an overview of what our marketing systems look like, okay? On the top is what our typical system looks like. Down here below is what one of our new campaigns is going to look like for one of these agencies, but the framework stays the same, okay? Going back over into that PowerPoint, right? We're looking at the LinkedIn marketing frameworks. We have to take into account 4 different things, okay? So there's the LinkedIn work that's happening, the messaging, the attraction-based engagement coming off of LinkedIn. I would consider these, the first 3, a lot of phase 1 marketing. But now the fourth one right here is one that a lot of people miss, no matter how good you are at the front end. It's that top of mind engagement-based nurturing, okay? So when we're going through and we're looking at how to design a successful campaign, one of the things that we have to take into account with the producers that we work with is that we are looking for high-value clients. Now, with a high-value client, the way that I like to categorize a high value client is essentially anybody that has a lot of money or is making a lot of money. Now, that can be a business owner, that can be a high income earning professional like a doctor, C-level executive. It can be a high net worth individual. A lot of the mentalities surrounding each of these types of individuals or professionals or whatever it might be, the mentality is very similar. Okay. But with, with a high value client, you're going to come across a number of folks that are in different stages of the buying journey. You're going to have folks that are their pain point is right at the surface. We sent out a YouTube video or a training that we did last week talking about the 3% rule. Who was it? Chet Holmes was the one who popularized that, right? But somebody who's in that 3% category, they already know their pain point. They already know that they got to implement a solution. They've been doing some research. A great example of this is our oldest advisor up in Seattle, Washington. His name is Bob. Absolutely love Bob to death. One of the best relationship builders I've ever come across, right? Now, Bob, he's 89 years old, okay? Now, because Bob is 89 years old, technology is not his strong point. But I know for a fact, if I can get Bob on the phone with somebody, Bob's going to be able to build that relationship and be able to close business if business is there to be closed, okay? Now, with that in mind, when we're going through these frameworks on the LinkedIn side, let me go back to this, okay? So connection request messaging, attraction-based engagement. So let me go into what our typical structure is going to look like, okay? So for the framework for the LinkedIn side is what you're seeing right here. This is the actual LinkedIn work, okay? So the framework on the connection request side is number one, who are we going to be targeting? Do we have a good standard operating procedure on who we're going to be targeting, or are we shooting from the hip every time? That's something that we had to standardize, right? Connection requests, I already touched on how we're getting people to connect with us. Now, where the framework comes in on the LinkedIn messaging side, okay? This is where you're going to hear me say this time and time again. You need to remove emotion from the equation and make data-based decisions. So one of the things that I'll come across with producers who are not comfortable with social media, or they're new to it, or they haven't done any outbound marketing to any degree, to where it's their name and their face attached to a message that's being sent. A lot of times they will inject their emotions and their thoughts into that message specifically, saying, I don't know if I would say that. I don't know if I'd word it this way. I don't know if I'd word it that way. Your emotions are irrelevant when it comes to this process. You have to be able to make those database decisions. So inside of the direct messaging here, what we'll typically do is have a messaging sequence of maybe, let's say, 5 messages, right? Now, sometimes that goes up to 6 or 7, sometimes it's 4, depending on what we're looking to accomplish. But inside of there, the framework is always being able to come across warm, relationship-based, and as a real person, right? Now, from there, we can't just get into these conversations of, small talk, talking about the weather, talking about, their family, whatever it might be. While those are things that can eventually lead to a good conversation, money loves speed, right? Now, from there, we have to take into account this, where is it? Give me one second. We have to take into account this third framework right here, attraction-based engagement. Now, what we want to do is start filtering out the individuals who are closer to that 3% category, who are ready to move forward quickly. Now, recap of those stages that Chet Holmes mentions in the 3% rule. You have 3%, 7%, 30, 30, 30, okay? Now, the 7% and the 3% are typically those who are going to move forward quicker, right? Now, again, go watch that video if you haven't already to understand the 3% rule. But inside of this message, we need to make sure that we can start attracting individuals who are ready to move forward quicker without burning bridges of the other 90% who are going to need more hand-holding, more nurturing before they're ready to move forward. So inside of this messaging, we're going to position some sort of value-based offer. Again, working off of the framework that we've created on the messaging side, we are going to start attracting the folks who have one of 2 needs, either a retirement income planning need or a tax advantage planning kind of need, right? So those are the 2 things we're going after. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody who's concerned about long-term care won't come forward, or somebody who is interested in legacy planning won't move forward. But we have recognized that those are the top 2 pain points that get people to move forward quickly in this economy, in this environment, right? So from there, we have that messaging dialed in to where we're offering that first value-based offer. We're attracting the folks off of LinkedIn who have a need for that offer. And then from there, if we need to throw in some manual messaging, let's say somebody's a little bit wary of, hey, I might want this. I don't want to talk to a salesperson, whatever their concern is. Now we have the messaging templates in place so that we can manually cut and paste a message to send back to that person, right? That's what a framework does for us. It allows us to individualize the customer buying experience for each prospect without needing to shoot from the hip every single time, so that we can optimize it as we need to by tracking that data. Okay. Now, going back over here, there's I'm going to dive into a couple of different things here in just a minute. So the follow-up call, meetings and stuff like that, I'm going to touch on those in the additional stages, right? But the one that I want to point to right here is the top of mind engagement nurturing. Okay. Now, if you have been coming to these workshops, if you're on our email list, there's a case study that I put out last week or the week before about one of our advisors who was able to land an $8 million client after being connected on LinkedIn for over 3 years. Now, we don't want to wait 3 years to be able to land a single client, but some of these high value clients will need that additional nurturing. They'll need those additional touch points. Otherwise, when they're ready to move forward, hey, they're going to hop on Google. They're going to go talk to their friends about finding a retirement planner or financial advisor or whoever. But if we structure this the right way, if we are top of mind, if we are with them every single step of the customer buying experience, when they are ready to take action, when they have a triggering event in their life where they're like, shoot, I've got to do tax planning. I've got to plan for retirement. Whatever their triggering event is, they know exactly who to turn to because you've been with them every single step along the way. And so that's on the LinkedIn side, whether somebody takes advantage of this initial value-based offer or not, we have it built into the system, into the framework, so that we are going to stay top of mind on an ongoing basis. Now, we utilize automation, we utilize different programs or whatever it might be to be able to create these ongoing nurturing sequences. One of the things that you'll find is that as you have more time than money, yes, you have the time in your day to be able to customize an email marketing piece, or you have the time in your day to be able to send out, a video or do a webinar, whatever it might be. But as you get busy and as you scale up, what you're going to find is, hey, you're working with real people, right? Which is where you should be focused. You need to be focused on the highest revenue generating activities. And that's where the automation comes into play, so that the communication, the nurturing can be going out 24/7, regardless of what else you have on your plate. Okay. So that's where, with the frameworks on the marketing side, we have that top of mind engagement based nurturing, right? Where we have different videos, landing pages, and they all lead to the central spot, right? They all lead to what we're after, is an actual meeting with a prospect, right? So again, that advisor was able to land the client after over 3 years of nurturing. What was really interesting about that case in particular was that prospect had been sent over 97 follow-up emails and had opened every single one of them, every single one of those. Now, that's somebody going to the Chet Holmes 3% rule. That's somebody who's in the bottom 60%, right? He thought he didn't need an advisor. He thought he didn't need help. He was doing everything himself. But what he said when he met with the advisor was, some of the topics that you sent out, it got me to start thinking, hey, maybe I don't know what I don't know, which is exactly what we want to have, right? Now, let's move forward down to the follow-up frameworks, okay? So the follow-up frameworks, this is where most of our active producers have the most questions, right? Especially if they are newer to the business. Now, the way that we have structured our LinkedIn marketing systems and campaigns is that it's all centered around this foundation of your quickest path to cash is conversations. So whatever we do is designed to create a conversation between you and an engaged prospect. So when we go through, this initial value-based offer is set up to where, in order to get access to that value, and now this value-based offer has to have both tangible and intangible value attached to it, okay? It has to be seen as valuable in the prospect's eyes, whether they work with you or not. Now, in order to get access to that value-based offer, what we'll do is we'll require them to put in their name, email address, phone number, physical address. This is something that we're actually shipping out to them, okay? Now, because we are sending out something in the mail, we actually have a physical value-based offer that we are sending out. We require a shipping address. That is what sets up the premise for this first follow-up call. Now, when I talk to an advisor who has never done outbound marketing, or they are very new to outbound marketing in general or marketing processes, this is where a lot of confusion sets in. So just because somebody requests a value-based offer that centers around the 0% tax bracket, or centers around what you and I both know are IULs or whole life or LERPs or whatever, it does not mean that when you talk to them, they are ready to talk about alert. It does not mean that it is the appropriate time to start pitching and selling an IUL. Okay. This follow-up call, the way that we structured the framework of this is to number one, the way to get the prospect to lower their guard is you're calling to confirm their address. It is a call that they're expecting. It is a call that naturally makes sense in their mind, right? Now, from there, we don't just want to confirm the address and then say, all right, I'll get it out to you. Hopefully you come back, right? Now is the opportunity to maximize this conversation with this prospect. So the way that we set it up, the framework, the initial framework that we have for producers, and again, as you go through this, you will find a cadence and a rhythm that works for you based on how you like to say things, your wording, your solutions. You'll find your cadence, right? But the initial framework, we have to be able to have something in place that we can test, is to simply say, hey, what piqued your interest about this value-based offer and made you want to request it, right? The purpose of that conversation is to get them to open up, to start understanding where they're at. Hey, what keeps you up at night? What are you worried about? Why did you want to request the thing about, tax advantage or retirement income planning in the first place? From there, you build a relationship and you simply get the person to the very next step, which more often than not, excuse me, is to have a more formal conversation or a more formal meeting with you. Okay. So it's not saying, hey, I sell IULs. Do you want to get to the 0% tax bracket? Here's an IUL. Here's what I can do for you. Tell me about your 401k. How much money do you have in there, right? No, you are simply building a relationship, understanding their pain points, getting them to commit to the next step. Okay. We're dangling that carrot out there so that you can lead them down the path that you know that they need to go down. Okay. Now, the other thing that we have inside of here is that if somebody doesn't respond, okay? Now, if you are dealing with high value prospects, high value clients, these people are most likely busy. They have 25 other things on their priority list that day other than answering your phone call or talking to you or reaching back out, okay? So now, inside of there, you have to have a framework on how you're going to follow up with this person. Now, going back to what I said about focusing on revenue generating activities, this following up with this person is a revenue generating activity. There is something about this value-based offer that piqued their interest that got them to request it. So the framework is just, giving an example is, hey, phone call. If there's no response, another phone call with a voicemail, text message, LinkedIn message, right? Simplest framework out there. Now, if you do that right, that's going to eat up, 10, 15 minutes of your day at most, right? It's not a long process. It's not going to take you a long time to do it if you have the framework down. Where you get into trouble is, I'll follow up tomorrow, or, hey man, I saw this person requested the book and man, I'll just shoot them a message real quick or whatever it might be. If you're just shooting from the hip, you have no data to track. Okay. Now, let's say you get somebody to request a consultation, a strategy session with you. This is where we had a really good producer ask the question this morning. Hey, I think we launched this campaign maybe a week ago. He's got, if I heard the message right, maybe 3 strategy sessions booked. He's had like 7 or 8 people come in and request that value-based offer over the last week, which is awesome, right? And he's like, hey, what do I do on this call? What am I doing? What am I saying? What am I going into? Again, this is where the framework becomes extremely important. Now, with this conversation, we hope that you already have had a follow-up call to understand a little bit more about that prospect, where they're at, what keeps them up at night. But let's say that they booked a meeting for the very next day or the same day or whatever it might be. You may not know that. So the framework is to, again, build a relationship, to uncover their financial pain points, to see what keeps them up at night, and to start teasing the solutions of what you can do for them. It's not the appropriate time to start pulling out illustrations and talking about, how they need to move $1 million out of their 401k today because X, Y, and Z. Again, make sure that with these high value prospects, you're treating them like real individuals, okay? You're treating them like a real person. You're a real person, they're a real person. So build that relationship. Again, understand where they're at and where they're coming from. And then from there, you've got the frameworks in place so that, hey, if they're ready to move forward quickly, here's the path that I'm going to take you down, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect. I got to have a financial intake form. I got to understand exactly where you're at. Then I can develop the blueprint. Next meeting, we can talk about what that actually looks like. Or if somebody's more of that slow burn prospect, that's okay. That's completely okay. Again, just because this is important to you does not mean it's important to them yet. So you have to be able to factor that in, take that into account so that you can address it accordingly. hey, if somebody wants to read the book before they commit to a next meeting, that's fine because we're gonna we're gonna be following up with them on an ongoing basis. We're not leaving them hanging out to dry or whatever, but set the expectation of when you are going to be following up with them next, right? Set the expectation of, hey, when you're reading the book or you're looking at this value-based offer, pay attention to this. I think this is going to be very important to you, right? And then let's talk about it after you've read chapter 4 or whatever it might be, right? But that framework becomes extremely important to be able to keep them moving down the path to conversion, right? Now, let's go into this is going to be the last thing that we cover because I got to run is that inside of the sales frameworks, this is something that we had to dive into deep with one of our advisors. Again, very successful advisor, on track to do. We're hoping we get to the million mark in revenue this year, just life and health only producer. We're focused on life and annuities, but we're really hoping to get to that $1 million mark, right? We're close. We've got applications that are signed they're in process right now that if they close, that'll get the producer to that $1 million mark, right? But inside of the sales framework, this is something that we had to deconstruct and reconstruct Q1 of this year. Okay. Now, what we found inside of the sales framework, no matter where the prospect came from, is that it was almost too fast of a process and too overwhelming of a process for that prospect to be able to move forward. It felt like I remember specifically one of the clients that ended up coming through, and I'm really glad that the client had a great relationship with the advisor because the client was like, hey, I feel like I've had to take on a part-time job just to fill out your financial questionnaire, right? The financial questionnaire, okay, this is where we go into the data gathering framework, was somewhere around 120 plus questions, right? Now, was that information all relevant? I would say the majority of it was, but inside of there, number one, we were asking fluff questions, right? Or the advisor was asking fluff questions. What activities do you like? Do you play pickleball? Just as an example, right? I don't think pickleball was in there. But what we ended up doing was we started to break down the sales framework into snackable stages for the prospect so that they didn't feel like they had to take on a part-time or full-time job just to be able to get the advisor the information that they needed. So what we did was instead of 120 questions on the intake form, we were able to whittle that down to about 60 to 65 questions, give or take. Now, with the way that the form is laid out, and this is very important, okay, is instead of having a giant form where the client looks at it, the prospect looks at it, and they have this sense of overwhelm where they're like, oh shoot, this is crazy. I got to fill out 120 questions or 60 questions or whatever. Instead of doing that, we set up the intake form so that it was one question at a time, right? They can't see the whole form, but it's, hey, here's question one, they answer it, they go to question two, okay? Breaking it down into snack size steps was it exponentially converted more folks to be able to finish that intake form, okay? Now, with the framework of the meetings, when we're laying that out for the prospect, originally it was 3 meetings, okay? Discovery call. Number 2 was going to be talking about the solutions. Number 3 was actually signing the applications, right? What we realized is like, hey, that's too fast for a lot of these prospects, right? We're looking at moving over multiple 6 figures or multiple 7 figures of their hard-earned money. They needed more time. They needed to be able to digest that. So we're able to break those up and to set the expectation, hey, instead of 3 meetings, we're going to have 4 meetings. Now, inside of there, we have the flexibility still with the framework. Hey, if they need meeting 2.1 or 2.2, we got you. We have the process for that, right? So bottom line, it's the combination of those frameworks that are going to allow you to, number one, get more wins. Number 2, scale your wins. One of the things you got to take a look at is if you are manually doing each and every one of these phases, there's either no automation or there's no frameworks or whatever. If it's a manual process each and every time, now all of a sudden you have to take up hours of your day or week just to cater to 1 or 2 specific individuals. Instead, if you have those frameworks down, that's what allows you to be able to go in and put as much as you can on autopilot or be able to have that framework in place so that when you encounter a certain situation, you're able to implement the right framework. So we are out of time for today. Let me know what questions you guys have. You can find my calendar at chatwithtyson.com, and I'll talk to you soon.